Madam President, I'd like to talk today for a few minutes about food stamps and the Farm Bill. And let me preface by saying that it's been my experience that the American people are the most generous people in the world. We spend about $1 trillion of taxpayer money at the federal, state, and local level, helping our neighbors who are less fortunate than we are. In America, and I'm very proud of this, in America, if you're homeless, we will house you. If you're too poor to be sick, we'll pay for your doctor. If you're hungry, we will feed you. And that separates our country from a lot of other countries that exist and have existed in the world, and I'm very, very proud of those principles as an American. So I do get upset when people suggest that the American taxpayer is not generous with his or her money. We're the most generous people in the world. Now, in that regard, Madam President, I know, as do you, that for many Americans, the food stamp program, we call it the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, some people call it SNAP, means the difference between an empty stomach and a warm meal. And that's just a fact. I'm talking about the men and women, many of whom are hardworking, who do all they can to provide for their families. But they just need a little extra help to put food on the table. And American people are happy to provide it. Each and every year, the federal government spends more than $68 billion, not millions, $68 billion to make sure that no American has to wonder where his or her next meal is going to come from. And it's the generosity of the American people that pays for those meals. If the food stamp program is going to continue to provide food to the 42.2 million Americans who use their benefits every month, and I want you to think about that, 42.2 million Americans out of a country of 320 million, including 1 in 5 Louisianians, and we've got to do our part to ensure the program's integrity. And right now, this is also a natural fact, the food stamp program is rife with fraud and criminal activity. Every year, more than $1.2 billion of SNAP benefits are stolen or are misused by criminals. So it's no wonder, Madam President, that Congress has been discussing requiring photo identification at the point of sale for the food stamp program since the 1970s. As early as 1981, our GAO testified. Now, GAO, they're not politicians, they're not Republicans, they're not Democrats, and I don't mean this in a pejorative sense, they're bean counters. GAO testified that such efforts would be effective in reducing over-issuance, but we haven't acted. Reform is long overdue, and the time to act, it seems to me, Madam President, is right now when we're considering the Farm Bill. If SNAP's going to be available to the people who depend on it, most in the years to come, we've got to do more to ensure that taxpayer dollars are going where taxpayers intended them to go. And that's why, Madam President, I have offered an amendment to the Farm Bill, which will help protect our precious SNAP dollars by requiring a photo ID to use your benefits. It doesn't take anybody off the rolls. It just says you have to have a photo ID to use your benefits. This amendment is very simple. It'll require states to list on EBT cards the names of all of those who are eligible to use the EBT card. Household members listed on the card must then produce photo ID at point of sale when they use their EBT cards. It's about as simple as you can get. We already have successful blueprints that prove this amendment will work. 2 states right now are already doing it and doing it successfully. One is Maine and one is Massachusetts. They both have successful SNAP benefit photo ID bills in law that already are saving thousands, indeed probably millions of taxpayer dollars. This should send a very clear message to every governor and every legislature and every congresswoman and every congressman that food stamp reforms can work. In the past few months alone, Madam President, we've had numerous SNAP benefit fraud cases that have been identified throughout our country. In Tennessee, for example, 2 men were found to have been selling their EBT cards to undercover cops in exchange for cash and heroin. In New Jersey, a couple managing a grocery store exchanged more than $4 million in SNAP or food stamp benefits for cash between the years 2014 and 2017. In Rochester, New York, a store owner was found to have used cash to purchase food stamp benefits from beneficiaries for less than half their full value over a 5-year period. Now, that's not what the American taxpayer intends the food stamp program to do. That one individual's criminal actions cost taxpayers and people who really need food stamps $1.2 million, and that was one act. And I could go on, Madam President, and I could go on, and I could go on, and I could go on. Now, we're asking in the Farm Bill taxpayers to spend $68 billion a year. We throw this figure $1 billion around like it was a nickel. $1 billion is a lot. If I started counting right now to $1 billion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it would take me 32 years to count to $1 billion. It would be 2050 when I finished. I wouldn't make it. We're asking taxpayers not to spend $1 billion a year, but $68 billion of their money on the Farm Bill. We have an obligation, therefore, to keep an eye on that money and to make sure it's going to those who need it the most. The federal government, not a single one of us in this Congress, should stand by and tolerate criminals stealing from the mouths of children. That's not a Democratic principle. That's not a Republican principle. That's a human principle. We owe it to the American taxpayer, Madam President, and to every family who relies on food stamps to put food on the table, to protect the program from those who would take advantage of our generous American spirit. And it's in that spirit that I will be offering my amendment. I yield the floor.